Every man begins with the same belief, that honesty will be enough, that if he stays true to his words, plays fair, and means well, life will eventually reward him. It's the illusion he's been raised on, the idea that truth automatically commands respect, that goodness guarantees loyalty, that transparency wins trust. But the older he gets, the more he realizes the world doesn't run on truth. It runs on leverage. You can see it in boardrooms, in relationships, in every social hierarchy. The loudest are not always the most capable. The most admired are not always the most moral. Somehow, the world bends toward those who know how to control their image, not necessarily those who live honestly within it. The honest man enters this system with faith. He believes that being real is his weapon. He tells the truth, even when it costs him, assuming that sincerity itself will be noticed and respected. But the truth isn't noticed, it's weighed. And in a world obsessed with optics, a truth without polish looks like weakness. A confession looks like vulnerability, and vulnerability in the wrong hands becomes control. The honest man learns this the painful way. He's too open in a conversation, too trusting in a friendship, too transparent at work. He reveals his doubts because he believes in connection. But others remember his doubts as evidence. He shares his intentions clearly, and suddenly everyone knows exactly how to predict him. He doesn't realize it yet, but his honesty is slowly turning into a manual, a public instruction guide on how to disarm him. That's the noble illusion, believing that honesty and success play by the same rules. They don't. Honesty may win hearts, but it rarely wins games, because truth without discretion is like light with no shade. It blinds the one who carries it. The world loves to preach the virtue of honesty, but only when it's convenient. People say they value the truth. Until it makes them uncomfortable, they demand authenticity, until it threatens their perception of control. And the man who doesn't understand this ends up punished not for lying, but for being too real. He keeps wondering why integrity feels like a disadvantage, why deception seems to win more followers, why the truth costs him more than it pays. He doesn't realize yet that honesty is not a weapon. It's raw material. Unshaped, it cuts both ways. Refined, it becomes precision. The truth was never meant to be thrown into every room. It was meant to be placed where it matters. And until he learns how to do that, his honesty will remain his greatest liability. Because in the real world, sincerity without strategy doesn't earn respect. It invites exposure. And that's where the illusion begins to crumble, leading to the next revelation: the currency of perception. The world doesn't reward honesty. It rewards presentation. People like to say they value truth, but what they really value is how truth makes them feel. The man who learns to manage emotion will always outrank the man who merely tells facts. Everything in life is a transaction of perception. You don't get paid for being right. You get paid for being believed. And belief is emotional, not logical. It's the soft power that shapes reputations, relationships, and outcomes. Most men never see this. They think that by telling the truth, they're standing on moral ground. But in the eyes of others, morality doesn't make you credible. Consistency and confidence do. And those are tools of performance, not purity. Look around. The most respected people in any environment aren't always the most honest. They're the most composed. They know how to curate their words, how to control their tone, how to reveal only what strengthens their frame. They've mastered the art of emotional editing, a skill the honest man resents but secretly envies. He's been told that authenticity means openness, that being real means being fully transparent. But full transparency is exposure, and exposure kills mystique. Mystique, however, breeds value, because people desire what they can't completely see. And the less they understand you, the more carefully they treat you. Perception is the silent currency everyone spends. The unspoken economy that decides who gets heard and who gets ignored. You can see it everywhere, in how people react to confidence before content, in how appearance outweighs depth, in how certainty sells faster than honesty. That's not corruption. That's human psychology. People follow signals, not sincerity. The honest man struggles here. He speaks from truth, not performance, so he's often misunderstood. He over-explains, trying to make people see what he means. But the more he explains, the less powerful he becomes. Because every explanation is a confession of lower status. The moment you start clarifying, you admit you've lost control of interpretation. The powerful man never chases understanding. He doesn't beg to be seen for what he really meant. He lets others assume, and quietly uses those assumptions to his advantage. He knows that perception is malleable, and the one who frames the story first controls the truth that others believe. It's not that honesty is wrong. It's that it's incomplete. The truth needs framing to survive. Without context, it's raw, and raw things bleed easily. With design, it becomes architecture, something that shapes minds rather than being torn apart by them. That's why confidence matters more than clarity. The same truth told without conviction looks like doubt. The same truth told with authority becomes persuasion. Power lives not in the message, but in the delivery. If you want your honesty to matter, it must evolve. It must stop being emotional expression and become strategic communication. Because if the world is a marketplace, perception is the only currency that never loses value. This doesn't mean lying. It means learning how much truth the moment can hold. Because the truth told too early feels like arrogance, and the truth told too late feels like deceit. Only the man who times his honesty correctly earns both trust and control. So the rule is simple. Don't rush to be understood. Engineer how you're interpreted. Because what people see in you is always stronger than what you say to them. And once you understand that, you begin to see why complete transparency, the urge to show everything, is the fastest way to lose respect. That's the next truth to confront. The weight of transparency. Transparency feels noble at first. It feels like strength, like you have nothing to hide, nothing to prove. You tell yourself that openness will make people trust you, that honesty will protect you. But slowly, you start to notice something strange. The more people know about you, the less they respect you. It's not because you've done something wrong. It's because mystery is magnetic, and you've given it away. Every story, every confession, every unfiltered emotion removes one layer of tension. The tension that made you interesting. Without it, you become plain, predictable, familiar. The man who reveals everything becomes emotionally transparent, and emotional transparency invites management. People start adjusting to you, reading you, predicting your moves. What once felt like openness turns into exposure. They know what drives you, what irritates you, what you'll forgive, and soon they begin to use it. Not always maliciously, sometimes unconsciously, but the effect is the same. Your presence loses gravity. Transparency is supposed to build trust, but in the wrong proportions, it destroys weight. People respect distance more than disclosure. They don't need to know everything about you to follow you. They just need to feel your stability. And stability is never loud. It's controlled, private, contained. The problem isn't honesty. The problem is excess. When you tell people every thought, you remove the discipline that keeps your emotions sacred. You make your inner world public property. Soon, others will treat it like something they can enter, rearrange, and exit at will. That's how boundaries erode, not through betrayal, but through voluntary exposure. The powerful man doesn't overshare. He speaks when it matters, reveals only what strengthens the perception he's building. He understands that silence isn't secrecy, it's strategy. Mystery isn't manipulation, it's maintenance, because value depends on scarcity. If everyone has access to your truth, it stops being valuable. The honest man wants to be known. The strategic man wants to be understood correctly. And those are not the same thing. Understanding comes from structure, not surrender. He gives fragments, never the whole blueprint. He leaves questions unanswered on purpose, because curiosity keeps him alive in people's minds long after he's gone. Transparency feels clean, but too much of it dissolves identity. To keep respect, you must hold something back, not out of deceit, but out of discipline, because once you show everything, you give the world permission to rearrange you. So learn this. Be honest, but not available. Be open, but not decoded. Let people know your story, but never your strategy. Because the moment you lose your mystery, you lose control of your meaning. And that leads to the next turning point. When the honest man finally faces the emotional toll of his misplaced virtue. That's the next step. The pain of misplaced virtue. There's a quiet heartbreak that only good men know. The moment they realize their honesty has cost them more than deceit ever could. They sit there, replaying every conversation, every time they told the truth, thinking it would earn trust, only to watch it be used as leverage. The pain isn't from betrayal. It's from disbelief. Disbelief that sincerity, the very thing they thought would save them, was the exact thing that made them vulnerable. This is the tragedy of misplaced virtue. The honest man assumes that morality protects him from manipulation. He believes that by being transparent, he's making the world safer. But morality doesn't shield you from strategy. It only blinds you to it. And when you can't see strategy, you're always playing defense in a game you don't even know you're part of. He keeps wondering why others rise faster while he stays overlooked. He works harder, speaks clearer, gives more, yet still ends up behind those who say less, do less, but understand timing. Because the world doesn't pay you for honesty, it pays you for effect. You can be right all day and still lose if you don't know how to frame your truth in a way that others can't twist. Misplaced virtue makes a man slow. It makes him over-explain, over-trust, over-give. He mistakes emotional comfort for moral strength. He wants to believe that truth alone is enough. But truth without discipline isn't purity, it's leakage. And every time he leaks, someone else collects. People sense when you're ruled by fairness. They can feel when you're the type who values peace over power. And while some may appreciate it, others will quietly exploit it. They'll test how much you'll tolerate before you push back, how many times you'll forgive before you withdraw. They'll study your consistency and convert it into control. That's when the honest man begins to change. The pain turns cold. He stops expecting fairness. He starts observing it. He begins to understand that the world isn't evil. It's just indifferent. And that indifference rewards the man who can adapt, not the one who insists on purity without awareness. It's here, in this emotional collapse, that wisdom begins to form. He learns that morality needs boundaries and honesty needs context. He starts realizing that being good is only powerful when paired with being intelligent. This is where virtue stops being naive and becomes deliberate. He doesn't abandon truth. He reclaims it. He learns that goodness, when unguarded, becomes servitude. But when disciplined, it becomes power. And that power begins with a single law, the lesson that divides the weak from the wise. Truth without strategy is weakness. Every man who loses because of his honesty has the same blind spot. He believes that truth speaks for itself. But truth doesn't walk into a room and command respect on its own. It needs structure, tone, timing, and intent. Without those, it's not strength, it's surrender. Truth is like a blade. Held with precision, it shapes the world. Swung recklessly, it cuts the one who carries it. And that's the difference between the honest man and the strategist. One tells the truth to relieve himself. The other tells it to reshape his environment. This is the rule that divides wisdom from idealism. Truth without strategy is weakness. Strategy doesn't mean deceit. It means design. It's understanding that information is currency, and how you spend it determines whether you gain power or lose it. When you tell the truth without control, you give away your position, your boundaries, your map. You hand your opponents a guide to your emotions, and anyone who knows your emotions can calculate your next move. That's why honesty, without control, makes men easy to read, and therefore easy to defeat. The man who speaks from impulse gives people data. The man who speaks from discipline gives them direction. To live by this rule, you must kill the urge to be understood. That need is the ego's trap. It tricks you into revealing too much, too soon. When you explain everything, you don't earn clarity. You lose leverage. Because power is not in being known, it's in being interpreted correctly. The strategic man speaks selectively. He doesn't flood the room with details. He gives just enough to guide perception. He knows that mystery creates curiosity, and curiosity builds influence. His words are not emotional releases, they are calculated movements. He tells the truth, but only the parts that reinforce the frame he's chosen. Every sentence he says carries weight, because it's been earned through restraint. He's not hiding, he's holding, and holding is harder than speaking. Restraint requires dominance over the self, not others. When you learn to shape truth instead of spilling it, your presence changes. People start waiting for your opinion instead of ignoring it. They study your silence. They measure your tone. Because when truth becomes selective, it gains gravity. That's when honesty stops being moral currency and becomes a strategic weapon. You no longer speak to prove who you are. You speak to shape how others move. That's the evolution of integrity into influence. The rule is simple, but it changes everything. If your truth doesn't serve your purpose, it serves someone else's. And once you master that rule, you'll start to understand the next level. The discipline of strategic truth. Once a man understands the rule, that truth without strategy is weakness, the real test begins. Because knowing the rule isn't mastery. Resisting the urge to break it is. Every situation tempts him to slip, to over-explain when misunderstood, to defend himself when accused, to prove his intentions when doubted. But each time he gives in, he trades power for relief. He may win the argument, but he loses the frame. The disciplined man learns to sit in the discomfort of being misjudged. He lets others think what they want while quietly watching how they handle the illusion. He doesn't rush to clarify. He observes. because every reaction people have to silence reveals their true alignment. The ones who trust his consistency don't need proof. The ones who don't were never loyal to begin with. Strategic truth is about timing, tone, and target. It's not about suppressing what's real. It's about releasing it intentionally. He doesn't tell everything he knows, only what serves the design of his message. Each truth he shares moves like a chess piece, deliberate, quiet, irreversible. In this discipline, honesty becomes precise. You stop treating words like therapy and start treating them like weapons, sharp, clean, and silent until necessary. A single, honest sentence, delivered at the right moment, can end speculation, dismantle manipulation, or anchor respect. But only if it's earned through control. The weak speak to feel better. The strong speak to create movement. Every time you explain yourself emotionally, you drain authority. Every time you hold your tongue, you charge it with power. That's the paradox. Silence builds louder tension than words ever could. Strategic truth doesn't lie. It leads. It's the ability to tell the truth that others aren't ready to hear, but to say it in a way they can't reject. It's communicating without aggression, commanding without noise. It's subtle, subtle enough to be underestimated, and that's exactly why it works. When a man reaches this level of discipline, honesty stops being personal. It becomes functional. His words no longer exist to express him. They exist to extend him. Each phrase, each pause, each glance, all calibrated to maintain control. And because his truth is now refined, people start to feel something different when he speaks. A kind of pressure, a quiet finality, a sense that his words don't just fill air, they settle in it. This is what separates the honest from the effective. Anyone can be genuine. Few can be controlled. When you learn to discipline your truth, you stop fighting to be right. You start guiding what's remembered, and that's when your presence starts to shift from honest expression to silent authority. That's the next stage. The silent authority of the honest strategist. There's a point where control becomes second nature, when you no longer chase power, yet everything around you quietly bends to it. You don't command people anymore. You anchor them. Your energy stops reacting and starts directing. That's the silent authority of a man who has mastered his truth. He doesn't explain himself. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't announce who he is. He shows it through composure. When he enters a room, tension rearranges itself. People lower their tone without realizing why. The noise quiets, not because he demands it, but because something about his stillness tells them, this man cannot be moved. This is what happens when honesty evolves into presence. You've stopped needing to prove that you're genuine. Your restraint has already done that for you. You've stopped advertising integrity. People can feel it in your calm, and most importantly, you've stopped negotiating with emotion. You let others talk, overshare, react. You listen, but rarely answer in full. Because you've learned that when you speak less, every word becomes weighted. This is the stage where people start mistaking silence for superiority. But it's not arrogance. It's discipline in its purest form. You've trained yourself to control expression the way a surgeon controls a blade, sharp, precise, necessary. No wasted movement, no wasted words. The honest strategist understands that power doesn't come from dominance. It comes from stability. Everyone else is fighting to be seen. He's fighting to stay centered. He's calm under provocation, unreactive under praise. He knows both are traps. One tests his pride, the other his humility. He serves neither. People begin to mirror his behavior. They pause before they speak. They measure their tone when addressing him. His presence forces them to confront their own instability. That's the hidden influence of mastery. Others begin to discipline themselves around you. But silent authority isn't about fear. It's about trust without demand. You earn it through consistency, not force. Through mystery, not noise. You don't tell people what to do. Your presence quietly reminds them of what they should be. At this stage, truth no longer needs defense. It's self-sustaining. Your words echo because they're rare, not because they're loud. And when you finally speak, people listen, not out of obligation, but out of instinct. That's when you know you've crossed the threshold. You're no longer playing the game of honesty versus deceit. You've outgrown it. Your truth has become invisible, embedded in your behavior, reinforced by your silence. But this kind of power comes with danger. Because once you realize how effortlessly you can move the world, pride begins to whisper. And that whisper is the final test. Because no matter how disciplined you become, if you start believing you're above others, the silence that once made you powerful will start to hollow you. That's the final warning, the final rule. Power doesn't collapse from the outside. It decays from within. The moment a man starts believing his control makes him untouchable. At first, restraint is discipline. You hold your words, manage your tone, and move with precision. But over time, that control begins to taste like superiority. You start to enjoy the silence you create in others. You start mistaking their caution for respect, their hesitation for fear, their admiration for loyalty. And that's how the silent strategist begins to lose. Quietly, slowly, invisibly. The same composure that once kept you grounded starts to turn into detachment. You stop listening, you stop learning, you start believing you've transcended the game, but no one transcends it. Not completely. Because the moment you think you've mastered human nature, it humbles you. This is the final rule. The goal of power is not control over others. It's control over yourself. Everything else is temporary. Respect fades. Presence fades. Even influence decays once the ego starts feeding on it. Power was never meant to make you feel superior. It was meant to make you still. Still enough to see the world clearly, act precisely, and remain human when everyone else forgets how. The honest man who learns this doesn't become cold. He becomes measured. He knows when to speak and when to disappear. He knows that silence is only powerful when it's earned through sincerity. He understands that influence without humility becomes manipulation, and manipulation always collapses on itself. The final rule isn't about dominance. It's about balance. It's about remembering that every skill, every restraint, every strategy was never designed to make you more feared, only more aware. Because in the end, the men who last aren't the ones who control the most people. They're the ones who control the most impulses. They don't need to prove their power. They embody it. And the room feels it even after they've left. Final line. Power ends the moment you start believing it's yours.